The bridge shook under the storm. 8 Navy SEALs stood surrounded, no backup, no escape, no hope. And yet, one shot was about to change everything. The steel bridge stretched across the canyon like a razor blade in the dark. Rain hammered down in sheets. Thunder exploded above like war drums from the sky. The wind screamed through the mountains, carrying with it the sound of death. 8 Navy SEALs were pinned against the cold steel, their rifles raised, hearts pounding. Enemy fighters swarmed from both ends of the bridge, hundreds of them. Behind the SEALs was a 1,000-foot drop into blackness. In front of them, certain death. Commander Martinez gripped his radio so tight his knuckles went white. Static answered him. No backup, no air support. The enemy had cut their comms. They were alone. Private Johnson, the youngest of the team, looked at his commander with fear in his eyes. His voice cracked, carried by the storm. "Sir, this is our grave." For a moment silence fell. The SEALs accepted the truth. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. But then, crack! A single rifle shot ripped through the storm. The sound echoed across the canyon like the voice of God. Every man on that bridge froze. Every enemy soldier turned their head. Even the SEALs looked around in shock. Who fired that shot? From where? They didn't know it yet. But that single bullet had just opened a new chapter in their story. And her name was Sophia Reyes. She wasn't tall, barely 5'2", thin, with black hair cut short in military style. Her dark eyes rarely met anyone's gaze. Around Camp Vanguard, she was known as the logistics girl, the quiet one, the shadow in the background. Sophia was the one who counted medical supplies, checked ammunition boxes, served food in the mess hall. While the SEALs trained under the scorching Afghan sun, Sophia carried clipboards, not rifles. She moved silently between tents, invisible, almost forgotten. "Hey, Doc lady," the SEALs used to shout. "Stick to bandages. Leave the real weapons to us." Their laughter echoed through camp. And Sophia? She never argued. She never explained. She simply lowered her eyes and kept working. But what they didn't know was this. Sophia Reyes had lived a life built on survival. She was born in the deserts of New Mexico, a land carved by stone, silence, and endless skies. Her father, Miguel Reyes, was a hunter. He taught her that the desert never forgave weakness, but it always respected patience. On their last hunt together, Miguel placed his weathered hands on an old Barrett .50 caliber rifle. "You don't need to be the fastest shooter, mija," he told her. "You just need to take the final shot. And that shot must be perfect." That rifle was no ordinary weapon. It was scarred by decades of battle. Miguel had carried it in Desert Storm. His father before him had used it in Vietnam. 3 generations of Reyes men had trusted their lives to it. But when Sophia was 19, Miguel Reyes was killed by an IED explosion. The military sent home his personal effects, the battered Barrett .50, a Purple Heart, and a burned piece of fabric from his vest. Sophia held that rifle in her hands, tears mixing with dust. And she made herself a promise. His war would not die with him. Now, years later in Afghanistan, that same rifle lay hidden under her narrow cot. At night, when the camp was silent, Sophia cleaned it by lamplight. She wrote in her journal, too, letters to her dead father. She told him about the war, about the men who mocked her, about how they never saw her. But she knew invisibility could be a weapon. 17 times she requested to join combat units. 17 times she was denied. "You're more useful in logistics," her commanders told her. "Leave the fighting to the fighters." So she stayed quiet. She stayed invisible. She waited. In her journal she wrote, "They see a girl with soft hands counting bullets. They don't see the daughter of Miguel Reyes, who could hit a coyote at 800 yards when she was 12. They don't see that I have been preparing for war all my life." The SEALs who mocked her didn't know she could strip that Barrett blindfolded. They didn't know she spent her off-duty hours studying the terrain with binoculars, calculating wind, mapping enemy positions, memorizing every tactical manual in the base library. Sophia Reyes was invisible. But sometimes the deadliest people are the ones you never notice. Then came the mission. The order was simple: secure the Khyber Bridge. Intelligence reported light resistance. Maybe 30 fighters. Nothing more. They were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. At 0200 hours, Commander Martinez led his 8-man SEAL team through the mountain pass. Night vision cut through the storm as rain hammered their helmets. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash the bridge appeared, a narrow strip of steel and concrete, stretching 300 feet across the gorge. But the silence broke in an instant. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lit up both ends of the bridge. Machine guns roared from bunkers. Snipers fired from caves in the canyon walls. The SEALs had walked straight into a perfect ambush. "Contact! Contact!" Martinez shouted. Bullets sparked off steel around them. More than 200 enemy fighters had turned that bridge into a killing field. The SEALs scrambled for cover, but there was none. One of them went down, hit in the shoulder. Blood mixed with the rain as his teammates dragged him behind a barrier. "Evac. We need evac now," the medic shouted, but no one could hear over the storm of gunfire. The radio was dead. Their comms were jammed. They were cut off, alone, outnumbered 25-1. "Sir, what's the plan?" Sergeant Thompson yelled, reloading. Commander Martinez looked at his men. The finest warriors America had, pinned down like prey. Behind them, the canyon yawned like an open grave. Ahead, wave after wave of enemy fire. For the first time in his 15-year career, Martinez had no answer. This was the end. But not for Sophia. 300 yards away, hidden with a supply convoy, she lay flat against the canyon floor. The Barrett 50 was beside her, wrapped in canvas. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it, her father's rifle gleaming in the lightning. Her heart pounded. She had trained for this her entire life, but training and reality were worlds apart. Through her scope, she saw the SEALs pushed back step by step, their firepower fading, their ammo running out. On the bridge, Martinez tried his radio one last time, his face filled with despair. But the static answered. Then she saw him, the enemy commander. A tall figure in black tactical gear, hand raised high. With one signal, he would unleash the final assault. In 30 seconds, it would all be over. Sophia placed her cheek against the rifle stock. She calculated wind, distance, and elevation. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "One shot, mija. Make it count." On the bridge, Private Johnson whispered through the storm, "This is our grave." "Sir?" Commander Martinez closed his eyes, ready to pray. And Sophia Reyes, the invisible girl no one ever noticed, exhaled, held steady, and squeezed the trigger.
The rifle roared. The enemy commander fell. And in that one impossible second, the war on the bridge changed forever. The Barrett 50 thundered like a cannon. Its muzzle flash lit the storm for an instant, like lightning born from Sophia's hands. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, but she didn't flinch. 420 yards away, the enemy commander's head snapped back. His hand, raised for the kill order, fell limp. His body toppled to the ground, and then silence. 200 enemy fighters froze mid-step. 8 Navy SEALs stared in disbelief. Even the storm seemed to pause. For one heartbeat, time itself held its breath. Then chaos erupted again, but this time everything had changed. "Who the hell fired that shot?" Commander Martinez muttered, peering over the barrier. The enemy fighters broke. Their careful formation dissolved like sand in the rain. Without their commander, panic spread. Machine gunners abandoned their posts. Snipers scrambled from their caves. The ambush collapsed, but the SEALs stayed pinned. Shock held them in place. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were trying to understand the impossible. Out there, hidden in the storm, someone had just saved them. And that someone wasn't supposed to exist. Then another flash, crack. The Barrett's voice rolled across the canyon like judgment. An ammunition truck at the enemy's rear exploded, fireball tearing the night apart. Flames roared up, lighting terrified faces of men who had been seconds from victory, now drowning in fear. "Jesus Christ," whispered Williams, the medic, still pressing down on his teammate's wound. "That's a 50 cal, eh? Who the hell is firing a 50 cal? The SEALs exchanged stunned looks. They had only one answer. Somewhere out there was a ghost. Up on her rocky perch, Sophia worked the bolt with practiced calm. She adjusted her breathing. Through her scope, she watched men scatter like ants. To her, they weren't human now. They were math problems, angles, distances, windage. She squeezed the trigger again. Crack! A sniper's nest on the canyon wall erupted, the shooter inside disappearing in a rain of stone. Crack! An RPG gunner crumpled mid-step, his weapon clattering across the bridge. Every shot was deliberate. Every shot was perfect. The enemy began fleeing in terror. This wasn't retreat, it was collapse. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were prey. Because somewhere in the storm, death itself was hunting them. Martinez raised his night vision goggles, scanning desperately. Lightning split the sky, and for a fraction of a second he saw her, a tiny figure lying prone on a ledge barely wide enough to hold her body. Rain plastered her dark hair to her skull. The Barrett 50 was massive in her hands, dwarfing her small frame, and yet she controlled it like it was part of her. Martinez blinked. His mind refused to believe what his eyes told him. Is that... Sergeant Thompson followed his gaze. His voice cracked with disbelief. Sir, is that the logistics girl? Downrange, Sophia ignored them. She wasn't thinking about her camp nickname, or the years of laughter, or the 17 denied combat requests. She was thinking about wind speed, about bullet drop, about patience. Crack. A fuel depot ignited, flames consuming crates of explosives. Crack. A communications antenna toppled, sparks scattering into the night. Crack. An enemy truck trying to flee burst into fire. Each pull of the trigger was surgical. No wasted bullets, no misses, just precision violence, unleashed by the woman nobody had ever taken seriously. On the bridge, Private Johnson's mouth hung open. Sir, how long has she been able to do that? Martinez didn't answer. In 15 years of combat, he'd fought beside legendary snipers, men whose names were etched into military history. But this was something else. Sophia Reyes wasn't just shooting. She was rewriting physics. The storm, the distance, the chaos, it didn't matter. Each round found its mark as if destiny itself guided her aim. The battlefield shifted completely. Enemy vehicles roared away, desperate to escape. Fighters threw down rifles, stumbling into the night. The canyon fell quiet except for burning wreckage and rain drumming on steel. For the SEALs, silence felt almost unreal. They had been seconds from death, and now they were alive. Cautiously, they stepped out from cover, rifles still raised. Their eyes scanned the cliffs where their mysterious savior had fired, and then Martinez whispered into his dead radio, his voice soft, almost reverent. Unknown sniper. This is Bravo team, identify yourself, Static answered. But through his night vision, he saw her again, cleaning her rifle, calm, steady, as if she hadn't just dismantled an entire enemy force. Thompson swallowed hard. Sir, I think we owe someone an apology. Martinez said nothing, but inside a question burned in his chest. If Sophia Reyes could do this, what other heroes had he failed to see? Lightning flashed one last time. Martinez looked back to the ledge where she lay, but she was gone. The storm swallowed her, leaving only silence. The SEALs stood among burning wreckage soaked to the bone, still alive because of a ghost, and the legend of the phantom sniper was born. 8 SEALs stood on the bridge where they were supposed to die. Rain dripped from their helmets. Flames burned all around, and the only question left was who had saved them. For long minutes no one spoke. The storm raged on, but inside each man's mind there was only silence. They should have been dead, trapped, outnumbered, surrounded. Yet here they stood, alive. Corman Williams finally broke the silence. He was still pressing a bloody bandage against Davis's shoulder wound. His voice was low, almost trembling. Did anyone count the shots? Private Johnson's head snapped up. His young eyes were wide, still in shock, but his voice was steady. 12. She fired 12 times. 12 hits. Not a single miss. Thompson shook his head, disbelief painted across his face. In this storm? At that distance? That's not possible. Martinez stared into the darkness, rain streaming down his face. Neither was walking away from this bridge alive 10 minutes ago. The men fell silent again. The impossible had just happened, and all because of a woman they had dismissed as a dock lady, a supply clerk, an invisible shadow. When radio jamming finally broke, Martinez called base. His voice was calm, but inside he was still shaking. Bravo team to Vanguard. We need immediate medevac for 1 wounded. Situation is secure. Unknown sniper provided overwatch. Repeat. Unknown friendly sniper just saved our lives. By the time they were extracted from the bridge, word had already begun spreading like wildfire. At Camp Vanguard, the story hit every corner within hours. The logistics girl, the quiet one, the shadow who carried clipboards. She had saved America's elite warriors, In the hospital tent, Davis lay with his shoulder bandaged, pain etched across his face, but his voice carried awe. "She saved all of us," he whispered to anyone who would listen. "We were dead men walking, and she brought us back from the grave." The same SEALs who once mocked her now spoke her name in hushed tones, as if afraid to break the spell. Within days, her reputation transformed completely. Supply sergeants who had barely looked at her now stood aside when she passed. Female service members saw her as proof that courage had no uniform, no gender, no limits. But the most profound change was inside the SEAL team themselves. They had lived through the storm. They had stared into the grave. And it was Sophia Reyes who had pulled them back. Late one night around the barracks fire, Thompson admitted something none of them wanted to say out loud. "I used to call her Doc Lady, like she was some kind of joke." His voice cracked. He stared at the flames. "Jesus, what kind of man does that make me?" Private Johnson didn't answer. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket, a large brass shell casing. One of hers, a spent .50 caliber round from the bridge. He rolled it between his fingers, his eyes locked on the firelight. "My little sister back home. She wants to join the army," he said softly. "I used to tell her to stick to something safe, a support role. Now, I don't even know what safe means anymore." Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't out of shock. It was out of respect. Meanwhile, Commander Martinez sat alone in his quarters. A stack of personnel files spread out in front of him. For the first time in years, he questioned himself. How many soldiers had he overlooked? How many heroes had been hiding in plain sight because they didn't look the part? Because they weren't loud? Because they weren't men? Sophia Reyes had shattered all of it. The nicknames started appearing almost immediately. The Bridge Angel, the Desert Ghost, the Phantom Sniper. But the one that spread fastest was simpler, the Shadow, because that's what she had always been, moving silently through their world, unseen, unnoticed, until the moment invisibility became their salvation. Officers wanted meetings. Military photographers requested pictures. Journalists asked for interviews, but Sophia Reyes refused them all. Instead, she returned quietly to her duties, counting medical supplies, inventorying ammunition, serving meals. The only difference was that now, the entire camp went silent when she walked by. Conversations stopped. Men stood aside. Soldiers who once laughed now lowered their eyes. They finally saw her. And more importantly, for the first time, Sophia finally saw herself. Not as the invisible girl with a clipboard. Not as the Doc Lady, but as the daughter of Miguel Reyes, carrying on her father's tradition, carrying the weight of his perfect shot. Weeks later, a new trophy appeared in Camp Vanguard. Inside a glass case, a single .50 caliber shell casing shone under the light, polished to a mirror finish. Beneath it, on a brass plate, were engraved 13 simple words. "One shot can open the way." The Bridge Angel, Khyber Canyon. It wasn't official. Martinez himself had paid for it out of his own pocket. A permanent reminder of what had happened that night. And slowly other stories began to surface. The supply convoy that always arrived right before a siege. The medical crates that always seemed to be in place before casualties struck. The ammunition that always appeared right as soldiers ran dry. Sophia had been fighting an invisible war all along, quietly from the shadows, making sure no one ever ran out of what they needed to survive. As Sergeant Thompson realized one night, staring at that shell casing, she wasn't just counting bullets. She was making sure we never ran out of them. Soon soldiers began visiting the trophy case like a shrine. New arrivals were brought to see it. Veterans stopped by daily, touching the glass with reverence, and a new phrase entered the military vocabulary: bridge moment. It meant the moment someone you underestimated stepped beyond their role, beyond expectation, and saved lives. Sophia's story wasn't just a legend. It was changing the way the military thought. About leadership, about hidden talent, about the heroes we don't see until it's almost too late. 8 Navy SEALs carried that memory with them forever. For them, it was more than survival. It was transformation, because the night they met death on a steel bridge in Afghanistan, a shadow saved them. She saved them. She changed them. But when they went to thank her, she was gone. The battle was over. The fires along the canyon smoldered for hours. Enemy fighters had fled into the night. leaving their weapons behind. The bridge that was supposed to be a graveyard now stood as a monument to survival. And yet, one truth remained. The woman who had made it possible, the shadow with the Barrett 50, was nowhere to be found. When the SEALs returned to Camp Vanguard, exhaustion hung on their shoulders like lead. Their uniforms were torn, their bodies bruised, but their eyes carried something heavier than pain. Or they had fought death itself and walked away alive. And all of it was because of her. But Sophia Reyes. She slipped back into the shadows as if nothing had changed, counting bandages, stacking crates, cleaning rifles in the corner of the armory. It was almost unreal. Her ghost who had saved them was now just another quiet figure in the supply tent. But change could not be hidden forever. Whispers grew into stories. Stories grew into legend, and legends have a way of living longer than people. Around campfires, men told the tale of the bridge. They described the muzzle flashes ripping through the storm, the impossible precision of each shot, the explosion that lit up the canyon like the sun. Every retelling grew more dramatic, but one detail never changed. It was her, the logistics girl, the quiet one, the shadow nobody noticed, until she became the only one who mattered. It wasn't long before higher officers came calling. They wanted to meet her, to ask how she had done the impossible. Some wanted interviews, others wanted photographs, but Sophia refused them all. She didn't chase glory. She didn't crave headlines. She simply wanted to keep serving, keep protecting, keep fighting the invisible war she had been waging all along. And yet, every soldier now looked at her differently. When she walked past, conversations hushed. When she entered the mess hall, men stood aside. For the first time in her life, people finally saw her, but Sophia. She wasn't sure she wanted to be seen at all. 3 weeks later, something appeared in the camp trophy case, a single .50 caliber shell casing, polished to perfection, mounted on wood. Beneath it, a brass plate with an inscription. One shot can open the way. The Bridge Angel, Khyber Canyon, Afghanistan. It wasn't ordered by the military. Commander Martinez himself had paid for it, quietly to make sure no one forgot. That shell casing became a sacred object. Soldiers touched the glass before missions. New arrivals were brought to see it. Veterans paused there daily, as though it carried the power of a prayer, and in a way, it did, because that casing wasn't just metal. It was proof that sometimes salvation came from the shadows. The story spread beyond Camp Vanguard. It reached other bases. It reached headquarters. It reached home. The Phantom Sniper, the Bridge Angel, the Shadow. Each name carried fear among enemies and respect among allies. Sophia Reyes had become more than a soldier. She had become a symbol, but legends are not meant to stay in one place. One morning, Martinez went to thank her personally. He walked into her barracks, only to find the room empty. Her cot was stripped, her belongings gone. On the pillow lay her dog tags, and a single torn page from her journal. It read, "I was never meant to stay in one place. My war is wherever bridges are burning, and good people need someone in the shadows. Tell them the logistics girl said goodbye." SR base security checked the logs. No transport orders. No recorded departure. She had simply vanished, just as quietly as she had arrived. Some said she returned to New Mexico, carrying her father's rifle back to the desert. Others whispered she still roamed the world, fighting from the dark, saving lives on battlefields no one would ever hear about. And every now and then, on some forgotten front line, soldiers swore they heard it, the distant crack of a Barrett 50. A shot too perfect to be chance. A shot that came from nowhere. They would look up, searching the cliffs. But they never found her. At Camp Vanguard, the legend only grew. The phrase bridge moment became part of military culture. It meant the instant someone stepped beyond their role, beyond expectation, to save others. Training programs began teaching it. Leaders started rethinking what courage looked like. And soldiers everywhere carried a new respect for the quiet ones, the ones you never noticed until it was too late. For the 8 SEALs who survived that night, the memory became a compass. Private Johnson, who once carried her shell casing like a talisman, later passed it to his younger sister. She had just graduated from Ranger School, the first woman in their family to do so. He placed it in her palm and said, "This belonged to someone who showed me that heroes don't announce themselves. They just show up when you need them most." Commander Martinez rose in rank, but he never forgot. Every time he reviewed personnel files, every time he assigned missions, he remembered her. The girl everyone ignored. The girl who had saved his life. He learned a truth that night he carried forever. Heroes aren't always the loudest. They aren't always the strongest. Sometimes they are invisible. Until the moment they're not. The Barrett 50 that Sophia carried disappeared from official records. Some claimed it was destroyed. Others believed it returned home. But Martinez? In his heart he believed she still had it, because legends don't end. They move, they adapt, they wait. The shell casing in the trophy case remained. Over the years it grew polished not by cloth, but by countless hands touching the glass in reverence. And if you looked closely at the very base of that casing, you could see one word engraved in letters so small they were almost invisible. Papa. Because Sophia Reyes was more than a phantom sniper. She was a daughter. A soldier. Her shadow carrying the love, patience, and lessons of generations before her. The bridge became a legend. The story became a lesson. And somewhere in a storm on some forgotten night, another group of soldiers would one day hear it again. The crack of a Barrett 50. A single perfect shot. And they would know they were not alone, because some angels prefer to remain invisible.